Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Welcome to This Week in Agribusiness, and thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm Mike Pearson here in the studio this week, and last week, American agriculture lost a tireless advocate. Bill Northey, Iowa's former Secretary of Agriculture, the former USDA Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation, passed suddenly last week. Bill was a guy who kept farming at the core of his being. It was one of the highlights. Anytime I'd be out on the road, to see his blue eyes out floating above the crowd, we'd have the chance to talk and connect. Bill was a farmer first, and he brought that farmer-centric attitude to all of his policymaking work. During his time as Secretary of Agriculture for Iowa, he helped initiate the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy, a bid to help Iowa farmers manage their nutrient runoff and shrink the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. He fought tirelessly for these issues and for funding for Iowa farmers and for farmers across the nation. It's been a heartbreaking week, and the tributes that have been floating on social media have been well deserved. Last week as well, people returned home from the NCBA annual convention in Orlando. We had the chance to catch up with CEO Colin Woodall about how the event went.
There's a lot of producer optimism right now. We're seeing a lot of smiling faces. That's because the market is looking pretty good. We do have just tremendous demand, not only domestically, but also internationally. And we're getting some moisture. Now, we don't have all the moisture that we need, and there's sure a question as to how long we can sustain that moisture. But everything is really coming together to help producers feel much better about where 2024 is going to take us. We know that just as soon as that moisture really does start to come in and come in consistently across cattle country here in the United States, that we will start to see that herd expand, and that's what everybody's asking right now. When is the herd going to start to expand? So we have the demand, we have the markets, now we need the grass.
Ranchers will be watching to see if that rain materializes throughout this growing season. Thanks to Colin Woodall for that update. Running a farm in this day and age requires power, consistent, reliable power. Joining me now to talk about that is Mike Newland, the Director of Agriculture Business Development with PERC, the Propane Education and Research Council. Mike, propane is unique when it comes to providing farmers that reliability on the farm. How does it do that?
Well, I think the big difference between our fuel and any other energy is it's storable. Farmers can put it in a tank at their facility and really control how that fuel is used and when it's used. And I think that's a big benefit as we look forward.
Do folks in agriculture find that as a benefit? Are we seeing ag using a substantial amount of propane?
You know, we do. Our market in total in the U.S. is about 10 billion gallons a year. Ag, even as big as it is, we burn about 10 to 11% of that total. So about a billion gallons per year annually.
Wow, Mike. So propane, storable, of course. Supply. How are we looking domestically for propane supply?
Yeah, we are in great shape, just in total. We produce our propane through natural gas production and oil refining, and really we're seeing a bigger shift to the natural gas production side of things. As natural gas continues to increase in usage around the country, also the propane supply continues to increase as well. So every year we're producing more and more propane. We're burning about 40% of what we could be burning here in the U.S. currently. So that means we're exporting 60+%. So one of the things that PERC does, we're out looking for new opportunities and trying to find more domestic ways to use that fuel.
One of the things I've seen just in my travels is more people firing generators on the farm with propane. Mike, I've got to imagine that's something you like to see.
It is. I think it makes sense. As folks become reliant upon the grid, you know, there's some things on the farm that really don't lend itself well to that instability. You know, whether you've got small animals, whether you've got a greenhouse, whether you're doing irrigation around the country and that water is timely to your crop, things have to be done on time on the farm, and that's one of the big reasons we think propane offers a great solution.
It offers a great solution. And Mike, toxicity. How safe is propane to just have on a farm?
It is ultra safe, non-toxic to the air, non-toxic to the water. I love telling this story. We've got propane irrigation engines that butt up right to the Everglades National Park. right on those waterways, and we feel very great about having our fuel that close to such a fragile environment.
That's incredible. Propane moving the world from agriculture to alligators.
How about that?
Mike Newland with the Propane Education and Research Council. Thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you.
Today's larger, heavier equipment can lead to more soil compaction issues. Firestone Ag IFVF tires with 82 technology maximize load capacity while minimizing soil compaction. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more. Now it's time to take a look at the markets. Joining us this week is Dwayne Bussey of Bolt Marketing up in South Dakota. And Dwayne, we had a couple of insights into the soybean crop in South America this week, one from the Brazilians, one from the USDA's WASDE report. What did we learn this week on that Brazilian soybean crop?
Well, I got kind of excited when CONAB, which is, Brazil's form of USDA, came out with their numbers. They trimmed the soybean crop from a 155 down to a 149.5. That's million metric ton. I was kind of hoping maybe USDA would follow suit on that and drop it that hard, but USDA likes to kind of slow play it a little bit, and they did not drop the Brazil soybean crop that much, a little bit lower, but not nearly that drastic. So, trade action is a little bit mixed. To call it maybe a neutral report.
Well, given the fact that it does sound like Brazil is still growing a soybean crop, Dwayne, were there any big changes to American carryout in soybeans? Are we going to lose more export business over the year?
That's what USDA thinks. They dropped the export demand 35 million bushels, which we expected a 25 million decrease. The 35 is a little bit more than I was anticipating. So in one way, it's like, well, USDA, no matter what we think the size of the Brazilian crop is, they think we're losing export demand, and they're not wrong, are they? So yeah, that's a little bit negative here. On the corn side of things, not a whole lot of change domestically, but CONAB did lower the second crop of corn in Brazil as well there. But again, USDA didn't follow suit with as big of a cut in corn. So kind of a neutral overall report, but maybe that's really what the trade was anticipating. So maybe this trade action afterwards, Mike, is going to be more important.
Well, that's true. Something to watch. Now we've got this in the rearview mirror. Dwayne, on the corn front, we know that the American farmer is undersold from last year's crop. Do you have any concerns about getting out of the physical here as we get closer to 2024's planting season?
Well, I do, because I'm a producer myself, and I have too much of my old crop corn on hand. Selling on the board last summer worked out great, but I still have the physical stuff myself as well. I'd say to those producers, look for, the carry out to July. If we get a pop in this market, you're just going to have to probably let it go. Now, in the short term, we don't have a lot of bullish news out there, but we do have the funds very short this market. And say we get a story like it starts to dry up in Brazil or something, because remember, their second crop corn is 70% of their total production. So there still could be a weather scare there. If we can get that pop there and the funds get nervous of their short positions, we could rally this market and then sell out to that July carry. But, the great bull run is over in the corn market.
All right, Dwayne, but there's always that hope that weather issues could pop up down there in South America. For those of us up here who maybe aren't plugged into forecasting down there, what is the timeline that we need to watch to see if a weather impact could drive some market movement?
It needs to happen soon, sooner rather than later. They're harvesting their soybean crop now and actually on a record pace as far as planting the second crop of corn. But that's just it. I mean, they're just planting it now. So the weather market could go for a ways, but, the earlier they get their corn planted, the more that corn crop is in their rainier season and maybe the less weather risk we have. So it'd be nice to see that weather turn pretty soon for South America if we're going to get any weather scare out of it, but time will tell.
Time will tell. There's a lot to watch here in the grain market as we get closer to planting, but there's also a lot happening in the world of livestock. When we come back, Dwayne and I will discuss what's moving in the world of cattle. Today's larger, heavier equipment can lead to more soil compaction issues. Firestone Ag IFVF tires with 82 technology maximize load capacity while minimizing soil compaction. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more. And we're back talking markets with Dwayne Bussey of Bolt Marketing in Britton, South Dakota. And Dwayne, every time we get together, I like to pick your brain on what's happening here in the cattle market. Last week, we saw that cattle inventory report come out, show that we are not rebuilding this herd yet. Does that give you opportunity to be bullish here in this market?
Yeah, it sure does. And I think even more importantly than me being bullish the market, I think that inventory report gave the funds the reason to be bullish this market. Remember, Mike, last year they got out of all those long positions, and that was really the driving force of why we crashed as hard as we did. Well, now they're out of all those positions. And like you said, that inventory report showed that we're down almost 2% year over year, which remember last year was tight supply. So we know we're having tight supplies moving forward. And those funds, I think, want to be long. And I think they want to be long in a big way. It's got me smiling from ear to ear thinking of the cattle market here.
So, Dwayne, I mean, we've had a $10, $12 rally here in the live cattle market since the sell-off from October to December. But you believe there's more upside to go? Do you have a price target as you watch these summer months?
I do. That's always the ultimate question, right? Is where are we going to go? Let me put it this way. We have the tight supply that we could go up and test last year's highs. There's no reason we really couldn't, at least when it comes from a supply-demand factor. Now, once we get up to those levels, economics 101 starts to take care of itself. We'll maybe export less, we'll maybe import a little bit more cattle. So as bullish as I am, and actually I will say I am calling for us to go test those highs, look at those back months and look at things like LRP, put options. I mean, there'll be a point in time. I am going to be a hedger, though, even though I am a raging bull today.
A raging bull, but that turnback could come, particularly as we push these prices higher. Dwayne, you mentioned that inventory's tight. We're not rebuilding the herd, but we do have the price of corn coming down. We do see carcass weights moving up on these animals. Can we compensate for the lack of inventory with total weight if we're putting through some heavyweight fat cattle?
Well, we sure can, and that's usually what happens. And honestly, a month or two ago, we were trending that direction. We were feeding these steers to a point where they look like elephants. But we had a couple winter storms and then a cold blast go through here recently, especially in Nebraska, the key feedlots. Carcass weights dropped a huge amount every week here, last 3 weeks. That's the big deal because that means now feedlots are current again, and packers can't just sit back and say, well, we know you have to sell those cattle. Now, the feedlots kind of have the control a little bit in this cash market, and I think that's what you're seeing in the futures market skyrocketing so much. I think we're expecting higher cash here in the short term. So stay current. Don't feed them to that elephant size because that would kind of make that hole in that production go away.
All right, Dwayne. So live cattle moving back towards potentially last year's highs. Feeder cattle, expect to see the same trajectory?
Yeah, I really do. Cash market's on fire. I mean, Wednesday alone, the cash index was up at 248. So really the March futures rallying at 248 is somewhat justified, even though it's very overbought and looks like it could correct at any point in time. No, cash market's kind of on fire, Mike, and it's up on fire here in the northeast part of South Dakota as well.
That's good. Maybe consumers out there buying, folks, love to see that demand in cattle country. We've been talking with Dwayne Bussey of Bolt Marketing. Dwayne, always appreciate your insights.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
Yes, it's time to take a look at what's coming from a weather perspective. And Greg Solier out on the West Coast, it has been wet, wet, wet. Is a dry down coming?
Yeah, a quieter weather picture and drier, much needed coming off that land basting of 10 plus inches of rain, severe weather, and devastating flooding as well farther south into California. The northern extent of that did clip parts of the Pacific Northwest, but it's pretty quiet and uneventful setup for this week. Here, there is a return of colder air into the Canadian prairie, but for now, basically a west to east zonal flow up aloft, so there's no big dips to the jet stream pattern, and hence weather systems are fairly weak and benign. One offshore, opportunities for some outdoor work across the Intermountain West, parts of the northern and central Rockies. Snowfall there has been a bit disappointing, and there's a little clipper system running down the periphery of some building cold air through the Canadian prairie and points out of the east from there. But for now, we think the majority of that should remain up to the north. There'll be a weather system scooting on by, and again, a northwest to southeast upper air pattern. Very cold air where it has been subject to a thaw of late into the Canadian prairie. Colder weather and a dash of snow back into the northern plains. Quiet across the Intermountain West, and some shower activity builds into northern California and the Pacific Northwest. Relatively uneventful compared to the storms of the past couple of weeks. And there's a feature offshore of the Bay Area early to middle parts of the week, but dry time much needed. Streams and rivers easing on down. Assessment of the back 40 from those rains. And the systems across the southern plains are containing a little bit of snowflake action coming off almost some record-setting warmth down there, but little, if any, organized moisture anticipated. We'll get a system to dash across the central divide into the plains. There may be a little light rain snow mix in the middle parts and late parts of the week of no significant consequence to ongoing dryness and drought, of which we are basically improving, and that winter wheat crop is assumed to be better this year so far. A couple of showers, West Texas cotton, all quiet of the weather scene as you venture backward into the Sierra and the Central Valleys.
Well, I know northern Corn Belt growers have had 2 weeks of relatively mild weather. Greg, does that trend continue?
It trends back into a little more seasonal, more typical, but remember it's February now. The seasonal averages are climbing. There's a little more insulation, direct rays of sunshine, and virtually no snow cover on the ground, of which that will change perhaps. Don't be alarmed, off to 60-degree weather, a little dash of snow on the ground into parts of the Corn Belt areas early in the week. Much colder air, but nothing really worse than seasonal norms north of the Twins. Next weather system out across the Black Hills. That'll skedaddle to the east and northeast. A little dash of snow towards the Sioux, to the Black Hills, up through Big Sky Country. Very cold, but north of the border, seasonal temperatures going to return to some mid to late winter sunshine and dry time too. Still need those streams and rivers to ease down a little bit into parts of the Corn Belt locales. Windy, colder weather around this weather system that will introduce a few flakes of snow as far south as Branson early in the week. Dry time for the southern plains. Pretty quiet weather picture across the Rio Grande. Showers and a couple of thunderstorms. They may beat up again on parts of the deep southeastern states early in the week, replaced by cool, dry, high pressure across the lower Mississippi Valley. Streams and rivers easing down there. A few sprinkles and snowflakes into West Texas cotton. The next weather system, week one, into the desert southwest.
Given all of that, Greg, what should eastern growers expect here early in this next week?
A change in weather coming off that absolutely delightful go of it with outdoor work. The rain over to some snow. The grounds are warm, but we may on colder surfaces, if you can find them, a little accumulation early in the week into parts of the eastern and southern Corn Belt. Much colder, but more typical seasonal air for early to mid-February through the upper Midwest. Wind and warmth and rain up and down the eastern seaboard with that weather system early parts of the week. Middle to late parts of the week, it's high pressure and control. Some sunshine, seasonal temperatures, a couple of snowflakes around the Great Lakes region, a weak clipper system up north of the Twin Cities. Windy, much colder weather and a wraparound effect of this weather system across down eastern Maine, looking and feeling like midwinter time up there. Down here into the southeastern part of the country, we'll beat it up pretty good again with showers and thunderstorms, heavy and severe. Florida Panhandle into central regions, warm, wet weather across the Carolinas, windy, colder weather, even a couple of snowflakes as far south as parts of southwestern Missouri expected early to middle parts of the week. Then things do settle down. It's a west to east flow, cooler, drier air over the southeastern parts of the country. A couple of showers expected central and south Florida. Meanwhile, all quiet the weather scene as you move out across the Delta. A couple of showers into the southern plains.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Pentair Hypro, a global leader in innovative spray technology for farmers for over 75 years.
Well, folks, we are getting excited for the National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville next week. But if you can't make it down to Louisville to catch the recording of the show on Valentine's Day, don't worry. We're also going to be in Houston for this year's Commodity Classic. And there is a lot coming at this year's Commodity Classic. Joining us now to dig into the details is Brandon Honeycutt. Brandon serves as the co-chair of the Commodity Classic Committee. He's a farmer in Nebraska. Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Well, let's dive into the details. Commodity Classic, for the first time, as I understand it, is going to be in Houston, Texas. When is that going to be happening, Brandon?
Yeah, it's our first time in Houston. It's coming up in less than 3 weeks. It's actually taking place February 28th through March 2nd. We think we have a great lineup, a great location, and a lot of fun things to do.
Now, the theme this year is New Frontiers in Agriculture, of course, with that NASA connection. Brandon, what are we going to be talking about? What are some of the issues up for discussion at this year's Commodity Classic?
Commodity Classic is always that fascinating event where you have sort of two separate things going on. One, we have the trade show. So, you get to go there, kick the tires, see what's going on, meet some of the more of the big wigs within some of the major companies that we're familiar with. And on the other side, it's also the association meeting. So NCGA and ASA, NOG, and the sorghum producers all have meetings going on. So we talk about the issues at hand, but that's just one part. It's for any farmers to come to the trade show, come to the learning sessions, really have a good time.
Brandon, now you've been involved with the Commodity Classic for some time. You're a farmer. You're involved in the ag industry. What's the appeal for you? Why did you want to serve in this capacity and be a part of this show?
We really think it's the premier show in agriculture, and there's a lot of things I personally have taken away over the years. A lot of times just at the trade show, walking around, seeing what's new out there, things that I have discovered that I've utilized on my farm now that I never would have had the opportunity to see if it wasn't for Commodity Classic. Plus, there's always the big reveals of new tractors, planters, what's the latest in seed technology. So there's a lot that from that aspect that I learned, but also going to the learning sessions, the mini what's news, all of those different events I go on help me bring something back to the farm and to my community.
Absolutely. And Brandon, I understand you've served on the Nebraska Corn Board. You mentioned this is the place that associations get together as well. And of course, 2024 is a presidential election year, so it's worth thinking about that kind of national impact this year, isn't it?
It is. We're still working on the farm bill. We've got a lot of stuff on the corn side from ethanol. There's some things going on also on the soybean side, and it's those places to have those conversations. It's a really important time for agriculture. We know some of the challenges going on, but this is always the event that I think brings hope and new energy and new life to agriculture.
Absolutely, Brandon. There's lots of work to be done at Commodity Classic, connecting with your peers in the industry, looking at what's new, but there's also fun and a lot of exciting things to do at Commodity Classic. Could you fill us in a little bit on some of the outside the trade show events that are going to be happening, either the tours or, of course, what happens at the end of this year's show?
Yeah, every year we have different tours set up, so people can go look it up online at Commodity Classic and just see what tours are still available, which ones they may want to join in on. We always try to have something for everyone, whether it's directly related to ag or maybe just a one-off. But one of the more interesting things that we kind of stumbled upon was it was just by chance, Commodity Classic is happening at the same time as the Houston Rodeo. And the Houston Rodeo is a massive, massive event with concerts every night, the rodeo every night. And so our evening of entertainment that we usually do on Saturday nights is actually taking place at the Houston Rodeo this year. The tickets are very, very limited at this point, but it's an up-and-coming country artist is the night we got. It's hearty. There's a lot of excitement around that concert, and it's always a fun time to be able to go to the concerts, be able to go to the tours. Just encourage anybody to do that.
Absolutely. It's a great time to kind of reflect on the busy week prior. Now, Brandon, for folks who maybe haven't made their arrangements yet, you mentioned tickets are getting short for the rodeo, but we can still get registered for the Commodity Classic event, correct?
Yeah, there's still plenty of time to register. Go to Commodity Classic online and see what days you want to go. If you want the full event, part of the event, hopefully there's still a few hotel rooms left right close to the convention center. But it's a great location. It's our biggest trade show ever. We have 2 separate floors of trade show space, lots of learning to go on. So I really encourage people to really take a look and make their way to Houston.
And we're building on a pretty big success, Brandon. As I recall, last year's Commodity Classic in Orlando, correct me if I'm wrong, was record large attendance, wasn't it?
It was the largest attendance we've ever had, and we think we can beat it this year. Coming to a new place, new activities, new ideas, we really think we can even beat last year's record.
And there's certainly plenty to discuss in the world of agriculture. Brandon, one more time, the Commodity Classic website is the place to go to get registered. It's the place to find the schedule, see everything that's coming up. Would you give our audience that website one more time?
Yeah, it's commodityclassic.com. If you go on the App Store, whether you're iPhone, Android, go look for the Commodity Classic app. There'll be free Wi-Fi available, so you'll be able to utilize that app on the trade show floor, get your schedule of events, kind of plan out what you want to see, get notifications. So look both those up and take advantage of it.
Absolutely, folks. Make those plans now. Commodity Classic will be here before you know it. Brandon Honeycutt, co-chair of the Commodity Classic Committee, thanks so much for filling us in this week.
Thank you for having me, and I hope to see everybody there.
Well, we certainly do too. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be at Commodity Classic Wednesday, February 28th, taping from 3 to 5 in the Case IH booth. We sure would love to see you there.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Max had the chance recently to visit with our friends at BASF to learn about their innovations in plant protection. Specifically, he was curious about fungicide.
What makes BASF fungicides unique?
One thing that makes us very unique is yield and the consistency that we see in that yield. So the number one thing farmers ask is this going to return on my investment, right? Am I going to see a return in the dollars I spend on the spray? And I think it's an important question to ask. So when we launched Veltima and Revitech fungicide, what we did was work on building a system that we could publicly display all of the fungicide data that we have. So revxfields.com has performance from full-scale fungicide trials all over the country. We've got 1,000+ proof points that are published by a third party. So a grower who's looking for performance, looking for consistency, which really does set aside Veltima and Revitech, they can see in what is the country's largest publicly available fungicide data set.
There are always those doubting Thomases, the non-believers among us, whenever you look across the products that are offered to farmers. Are you seeing any trends among those folks who maybe haven't yet come forward to come to the realization that they need fungicides?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. So we did focus groups recently and got the opportunity to talk to growers when they didn't know who I was, right? And give a really unbiased recollection of their experiences with fungicides. The first group of them didn't consistently use a fungicide. And you know what they did? They left a test strip. And when I asked them, hey, what kind of yield are you looking for to get that return on investment to really justify incorporating a fungicide as a part of your plan? And they left a test strip and they had, you know, I'm looking for $1.25 return on investment, and had very specific things to say. The next group who use a fungicide consistently, I asked the same question, hey, what kind of return are you looking for? And you know what, Max? They weren't even leaving a test strip. It took one season, maybe 2 seasons, for them to see that return on investment on their farm and be like, oh man, you know, I'm leaving bushels on the table.
So the grower is looking at what they want to be doing for the season ahead. What are some of the key questions that they should be asking relative to their fungicide needs?
I think the question is really, what is your yield goal, right? What are you looking for? How many bushels do you really need? What are you really expecting to get out of the crop? And trying to work backwards from there. It was really interesting. I had a conversation with an aerial applicator, and he'd done a ton of fungicide testing, a ton of test strips, had a huge data set. And what he told me that was interesting, when he looked, you know, section by section in the field, oftentimes the untreated control and the treated control, they were about the same, right? But what the difference was is that the minimum on the untreated was way lower, and the consistency on the fungicide treated was better. I've heard other growers tell me that, hey, I get a better ROI on my fungicide on my worst ground versus my best ground. So I really think when you think about using a fungicide, what you're really doing is you're taking that variability out of your field and you're raising your yields by raising your minimum.
How satisfying has it been to you personally, working for BASF, to hear these producer stories and to hear the passionate feedback you're getting from them?
It's incredible to see them bring a yield map and be so proud of what they did on their ground, to see year after year that improvement in yield. It's incredibly satisfying to represent a company that's bringing some of the best technology to the market and continues to pump a ton of money into innovation, because we're not done yet with BASF fungicides.
Thank you, Max. And folks, you can find the full series on the website at plansmartgrowsmart.com.
Greg Sodier is back now with his extended farm weather forecast for the nation.
Earlier in the program, Greg ran through who's going to get what next week. And Greg, it sounds like there's some precipitation in the forecast. Who's going to get what and when?
Yeah, primarily early in the week. So let's not get all worked up about this. That looks to be pretty impressive here, both early in the week across the southeastern parts of the country. Late in the week and into the upcoming weekend, we'll keep an eye on a system maybe strengthening offshore of Baja California. But in the meantime, some snowfall for part. You remember what that is. It's wintertime. It's still February into parts of the Corn Belt coming off that spring feel of the past few days. Rain over to snow for the northeast into New England. There may be some quick 1 to 2 inch downpours and severe over this part of the country. What drought? It's gone virtually. Big improvement on the drought monitor over the lower Mississippi Valley Delta region. Again, later in the week, maybe into the southwestern states. Otherwise, pretty quiet weather picture with 1/4 to 1/2 inch in the Pacific Northwest. Little to none for much of the upper Midwest, northern areas of the plains. Maybe a dash of snowfall later in the week. No big deal there.
All right, Greg, let's talk temperatures. Week of February 19th, what do you expect to see?
Well, the cold air is there. It's laying out again, but it's a very fast-moving west-northwest to east to southeast jet stream flow. Some semblance of the polar vortex, as you would expect for wintertime, reemerging Hudson Bay, James Bay. But we think it stays positioned here. Warmth across Texas and across the western reaches of the country. Moisture-wise, still El Nino-driven. California, southwest down to the central and southern plains, more drought relief there, and the Delta region, southeastern parts of the country, fairly quiet weather picture with below average amounts of snowfall for the upper Midwest.
Does that cold blob spread at all as we get into the final days of February?
Yeah, likely to stay pretty much intact, spreads out more west to east. The coldest is shifting to the north, and this is just a few degrees below average. We think very much manageable and a typical setup for this point in late wintertime. The warmth over the southern parts of the country. Jet stream pattern is still active and fast. Same with the weather systems for California into the plains and across the Corn Belt locales. Ought to go into springtime in good shape soil moisture-wise.
Does it start to warm up for that first full week of March, Greg?
Some moderation of temperatures across the northwestern reaches of the country, southeastern areas. Big show here is the reduction in northward movement of the cold air, and it's a drier scenario for much of the northwestern half of the country. Wet weather across the Delta region, parts of the southeastern states, and into New England as well.
Our Farm Progress Roundup is sponsored by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of high-quality, high-capacity field grain belts and augers. Visit brandt.ca for more. This week, we're getting to know Shelley Hughley. She's the editor for the Southwest Farm Press based in Texas. And Shelley, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us this week.
Well, good morning. It's good to visit with you.
Let's learn a little bit about Shelley Hughley. How long have you been in the world of ag journalism?
Well, this makes me sound old when I say it, but since the 90s, I actually was not born on a farm or a ranch and went to Texas Tech University as a nursing major and took anatomy and physiology twice and made a D twice, which led me to rethink my calling. And I had a friend in ag ed say, you know, what do you have a passion about? What are you interested in? And I said, well, agriculture really interests me, but I didn't grow up in agriculture. And she said, Shelley, it doesn't matter. She said, you're at school to learn. If that's what you love, pursue it. And I'm so glad I took her advice and I switched to agricultural communications and fell in love with it. And that's what I've been doing since I graduated.
And now, of course, you're not just writing about the ag industry, you're living the ag industry. Shelley, is that right?
That's right. I'm living what I write and writing what I live. I'm married to, I call him, if you read my columns, my farmer. And we farm in Olton, Texas. For years, we've grown cotton. In the last couple of years, in response to the drought situation, we've transitioned to sorghum silage, and that's been a good fit with the drought and the extreme temperatures that we endured, especially this last summer. So we decide on our commodities on a year-by-year basis, and like any producer, we're looking at and considering all the different factors that make those decisions.
That's what it all comes down to. Shelley, where can our viewers read the writing at the Southwest Farm Press?
Well, you can either receive the print subscription, or you can visit us online at southwestfarmpress.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at just General Farm Press. So I encourage your viewers to find us on social media.
Absolutely. That's Shelley Hughley, editor of the Southwest Farm Press.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. In Max's Tractor Shed this weekend, a farm all that looks real good. It even has the dealer decal. In this restoration, I'll talk about that at Max's Tractor Shed. Brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants producers are made to make it last. Well, back in 1968, I know some guys, when they got their new cars, the first thing they did was go out to the edge of town. There was a quarter-mile drag strip out there, and they would put it through the quarter to see what it did. I've also heard stories, one as recently as a couple of weeks ago, about guys who got new tractors back in that era of the 60s, and the first thing they did was to go to the county fair
and do a tractor pull to see what it would do. Well, Norman Shade did that with this particular tractor, this 1968 Farmall. Take a look at it here. He bought it new at Wallam International 56 years ago, and Norman took it to the McHenry County Fair in Illinois to see what it could pull. Norman's son Gary then owned that tractor, and now Steve Shade owns it. He bought that 1256 more than 3 years ago, really fixed it up. Steve's wife, Charlotte, said to me, I hope it stays in the Shade family. But about that decal, look at that Wallam International decal. If that name rings a bell, it might indeed, because that's Paul Wallam, longtime international harvester dealer in Belvedere, Illinois, the same guy who came out with those International Harvester books a couple of years ago. By the way, he has a new book coming out this spring. It's called Drives, and the foreword to it has been written by a guy by the name of Max Armstrong. You'll hear more about Paul's latest book. He just keeps on coming up with great information for us. Mark Stock has information on what they'll be selling in the week ahead at Big Iron. Here's his weekly report.
Well, hello, Max. We are so looking forward to seeing you at the National Farm Machinery Show this week in Louisville, Kentucky. While we're there, folks, we will have some of the online auctions on the screens, and we will be showing you how you can register and bid on an upcoming parcel of land or some machinery or livestock, even our classic car sale that will be on February 19th and February 20th. We do have some land selling in Knox County, Illinois, this upcoming Tuesday, February the 13th. 81 acres will sell to the highest bidder. We've got a big sale of machinery for the Scott Solberg Estate. This equipment located in Ottawa, Illinois, will sell on Wednesday, February the 14th. Late model Kinsey equipment, a 2022 Kinsey 3605 planter. Also selling a John Deere 6125R mechanical front tractor with a loader. On Thursday, February the 15th, 75 acres of York County, Nebraska land will sell. 671 acres of Stark County, Illinois land will sell in 11 tracts on Thursday, February the 15th. Friday, February the 16th, 240 acres of Livingston County, Missouri land will sell. Go to the BigIron.com website and SullivanAuctioneers.com for all the latest information on the machinery and land that will sell next week.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. And now it's time to meet that next generation of American agriculturalists. This week, we're talking with Madison Hudson. She's currently serving as secretary for the Arkansas State FFA. And Madison, how long have you been an FFA member?
So I have been an FFA member since 2018, but it's kind of been a part of my life. So ever since I was young, it's always just been something that I've known about. But I started my journey back in 2018.
Started your journey in 2018. What were some of your favorite activities as an FFA member?
I would probably say the competitions. I'm kind of competitive in a way, and I really liked parliamentary procedure as well as agronomy.
Parliamentary procedure and agronomy. All right, you like to win, and now you're in state office. What was it that made you want to run for leadership, Madison?
So I was a really quiet and reserved individual, and what I noticed in my years as a member is that it really got me out of my shell. So I kind of wanted to give back to the organization that put so much into me. So I decided to run for state office.
And has it been a good fit so far, getting to know some of the other FFA members across the state?
Absolutely. It's been a true gift, and I'm really blessed for this opportunity.
Well, that's fantastic. Now, as you look out longer term, do you hope to have a career in agriculture?
I honestly believe I'll always be interloomed in agriculture. I plan to obviously maybe have my own farm when I'm older, or possibly somehow make my way back to agriculture education. But currently, I am just going through college and seeing where it takes me.
Going through college and seeing where it takes you. Well, we wish you the best of luck, Madison. Thanks for taking the time this week to talk with us.
Thank you.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by Copperhead Ag Products. Visit copperheadag.com for more information. Chad Colby has a new look at the biggest piece of equipment to come out of Case IH in history. He joins us now.
Did you hear the big news this week from Case IH? Well, and I guess I literally mean big, as they rolled out the largest red combine ever, the new AF series of combines. The evolution of Case IH AxoFlow combines starts back in the 70s. It's nearly 50 years running, and this combine is packed full of performance. We're talking about 775 horsepower, and over 560 bushel grain tank that can unload in 100 seconds, 400 gallons of fuel, and when it comes time to start talking about efficiency, this thing's got it. It's got a stepped up rotor cage, of course, 2 rotors. There's a lot to talk about in this new combine. It comes standard with Harvest Command, which can automate the spreading, as you see right here, and it's got those brand new 1200 displays, which have been around for a few years in the tractor line. Now, of course, they're in the combine as well. There's so much to talk about at this combine, and certainly the first place you're going to want to go is your local dealer. As I talked to one this week, the rollout's going to take place over the next couple years. We're certainly going to see these things in the field. And speaking of seeing this new combine, it's going to be on display, making its North American debut next week at the National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville. So that's a first-hand look, and we can all see this machine, talk to the folks that are the experts about it who have run this combine. I think when you look it over, you start to realize really quickly, efficiency is the number one goal on this. What's the throughput? What can I do for my harvest costs? That's the conversations you have with big equipment like this. And to be honest with you, I'm looking forward to seeing it at Louisville, and most importantly, I'm looking forward to maybe finding a cab and running one of these things this fall. Certainly, it's an exciting time when you see new equipment that's really completely different, kind of like this one was when we got our first AxoFlow in the 70s. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad. And folks, if you want to see that machine in person at the National Farm Machinery Show, come by the Case IH exhibit. Do it on Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. and we'll be taping This Week in Agribusiness, and we'd love to see you there. What's next in the world of ag equipment technology? If that's a question you're wondering, well, the answer will be in Louisville for the National Farm Machinery Show. It's an opportunity for a lot of great exhibitors to highlight what they're bringing to the table for agriculture. One of those companies is Amazon. We're talking today with Mark Heater and Samuel Bailey from Amazon. Mark, Amazon's a name maybe our viewers haven't heard yet. Fill us in. Who is Amazon?
Yes, so Amazon, we are a German equipment engineering company residing in Gassel, Germany. We specialize in fertilizer spreaders, sprayers, planters and seeders, and also tillage. In the U.S., we have a small team since 2019 and growing slowly.
But it's growing. And Samuel, as you think about those fertilizer spreaders from Amazon, what sets it apart from the competition?
Yeah, so the great thing about our machines is that we really try to increase the farmer's productivity and to increase to improve the placement of fertilizer, allowing farmers to save on the fertilizer costs. And we use a lot of technology in our machines to do that. So for wind control, for one, we can compensate for the wind, or we have sensors around the back to monitor where the fertilizer is leaving the disc and knowing where it lands, and online weighing systems, so our application rate is super spot on.
That's incredible. And of course, it goes beyond fertilizers. Mark, can you tell us a little bit about the tillage equipment that Amazon has?
Yes, so in the U.S. right now, we focus more on our high-speed discs, the Catros. Sets us apart there is our non-greasable bearings, sealed, all that stuff. And then our biggest one has been the Cius. It's our multi-pass tool all-in-one, which has the high-speed disc gangs in the front, tine shanks behind that, loading discs, and all that. So you can do multiple passes in one and leave a nice seed bed finish.
Mark Heater, Samuel Bailey from Amazon, thank you both for talking with us today. There's always a lot to see at the National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville, and one booth you're going to want to make sure you stop at is Geringhoff. Joining us now is Craig Lee, the Director of Sales. And Craig, what could folks see when they stop by your booth at the National Farm Machinery Show this year?
Well, thanks for having me today. When you come by Geringhoff, one of the things we're excited to show at the National Farm Machinery Show is our flexible corn head, the AFT, the Adaptive Flex Technology. It's the first commercially available corn head that flexes as it's going through the field. And we've shown this a couple times at Farm Progress Show, but we've never had it in Louisville. So it'll be exciting to have it there, and we'll have it on display in flex mode, and you'll see what it can do.
That's pretty incredible. And Gehringhoff, of course, not just corn heads, also residue management. Can you tell us a little bit about what folks could see in that regard?
Well, we have various processing systems for our corn heads, depending on what sort of tillage practices you might be in, or what you're really wanting to do with the end residue. We have several different chopping styles of heads. We have our basic 2-roll knife roll system called the North Star. Then we add a swinging blade and call it the North Star Horizon. Then we have our premium chopping head, which is the Rotodisc, which is a proven product that's been around since 1997 and is really the most advanced, most thorough processing system on the market.
It's important to take care of these thick, heavy stocks. Now, for folks who are going to make it to Louisville in the National Farm Machinery Show, Craig, where can they find the Gehringhoff booth?
We will be in the north wing, right kind of as you come in the main entrance there. We'll have a big display. You can find the blue carpet and the overhead sign, and should be pretty easy to find there. So.
Fantastic, folks. Be sure to check that out. Craig Lee, Director of Sales at Gehringhoff, thanks for joining us this week. Well, folks, if you're going to be in Louisville for the National Farm Machinery Show, spend your Valentine's Day with us in the Case IH booth at 10 a.m. We'll see you next week.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.